morning, students. Yesterday we discussed the cost postulates. So today I'm going to discuss more about the cost postulates. Okay, the cost postulates which you have studied basically, which basically applies to only a single microbial infections. Okay, only a single microbial infections. But what is the scenario in the case of polymicrobial infections, where more than one pathogen basically infects an individual? And so, just repeating the cost postulates again, microorganism must be identified in all individuals affecting by a disease but should not be present in the healthy individuals, and microorganisms can be isolated from the diseased individual and grown in a culture. And when the pathogen is introduced to a healthy individual, the cultured microorganism should cause a disease. Okay, and the microorganism must then be re-isolated from the experimental host, which is found to be identical to the original microorganism. Okay, so this basically the rules of Koch or Koch postulates basically relates to a single microbe. Okay, now what is the scenario of polymicrobial infections? Depends on obtaining microbes in pure culture. Okay, and the procedure which Koch has recommended is basically extremely valuable, and since the most of the scientific experimentation requires isolating the variables and holding all but one constant at a time. So the aspect of the scientific rigor has been probably kept from understanding the roles that interacting microbes play in causing a disease. And many scientists now also believe that the majority of infections are basically polymicrobial with contribution from more than one microbe. Okay, from more than one microbe. For example, one of the classic example of the set of infections is influenza. Okay, is influenza and pneumonia. Okay, and as you know, influenza is caused by a virus and pneumonia is caused by a bacterium. Okay, and the influenza infection frequently leads to the pneumonia. Okay, influenza infection frequently leads to the pneumonia, and one of the most serious causes of pneumonia is a bacterium that is a normal biota in the nose of many people. Okay, so there are many more such examples also. Okay, and some of the scientists also found that the influenza caused a cascade of host responses, which in turn cause the host bacteria, which are usually a resident in a biofilm there, set to loose and travel to the other sites such as lungs or the bloodstreams also. Okay, so that situation would definitely qualify as a polymicrobial. So the polymicrobial concept comes when a particular when a particular disease is caused by more than one microbe. Okay, bacteria disease is caused by more than one microbe. Okay, so the situation. Okay, there are also another examples. Okay, let me share with you. Okay, several infections of the skin which are caused by either staphylococcus, okay, or streptococcus species is again one of the example. And researchers have also found that when these two are cultivated together with a common skin resident Moraxella, both staphylococcus and streptococcus increase their transcription of the virulence factors. Okay, and perhaps upon diagnosis one is isolated from the skin, but it seems possible that three of them together lead to the disease symptoms. Okay, so there are still more discoveries underway which are going to prove that many of the infections are basically polymicrobial. Okay, there are still many discoveries underway. Okay, so simply another example is of a bacteriophagus. Okay, you may have question how come a bacteriophage can infect a human being. Okay, it is not involved directly, but the best example is basically this bacteriophages, more specifically the coriniphages, more specifically the coriniphages, which infect the Corynebacterium diphtheriae. Okay, which infect the Corynebacterium diphtheriae. Okay, and due to the changes in the system of the Corynebacterium diphtheriae, it will now start producing various virulence factors. Okay, it will now start generating various virulence factors. Okay, so the coriniphages are not basically directly involved, but they are involved in an indirect way. Okay, but without the presence of the coriniphages, normally the Corynebacterium diphtheria are generally harmless. Okay, so its virulence is triggered by the presence of the coriniphages. Okay, by the presence of the coriniphages. Okay, now moving forward with the next one, which is an adherence. Okay, so after the initial exposure, the pathogen basically adheres to the portal of the entry. Okay, it means it attaches to the portal of entry, and the term adhesion refers to the capability of the pathogenic microbes to attach to the cells of the body using the adhesion factors, and different pathogens use various mechanisms to adhere to the cells of the host tissues. Okay, simply it's a the adhesion refers simply the attachment to the cells of the body using various adhesion factors, and different types of microbes or different types of pathogens have different types of adhesion factors, and the molecules are basically commonly known as adhesins, which help to adhere to the host surface. They are made up of proteins or polysaccharides, and these adhesins are basically found on the surface of the pathogens. Okay, and bind to the specific receptors, example glycoproteins of the host cell, and these adhesins are present on the fimbriae and the flagella of bacteria. Okay, and the cilia of protozoa, and capsid or membranes of the viruses. Okay, capsids and membranes of the viruses. And in the case of protozoa, they can also use hooks and barbs for the adhesion, and spike proteins which are present on the viruses can also enhance the viral adhesions. Okay, some bacteria can also produce glycolases, basically slime layers and capsules, which contain high sugar and protein content, and this can allow bacterial pathogens to attach to the cells. Okay, so the bacteria use adhesins which are often located at the top of the pili or the fimbriae, and binding of the adhesion to the host cell receptors is highly specific. Okay, they are specific to their host cells, the host cells which they are going to infect. Okay, so and often the type of cell which bacteria can attach. So there is a specificity level of these adhesions to their host cells. Okay, here are some of the examples of the adhesions or ligands which binds to the receptor of the host cells. Glycolates in the case of Streptococcus mutans, fimbriae in the case of Escherichia coli, M protein in the case of Streptococcus pyogenes, OPA protein in the case of Neisseria gonorrhoeae, taper, and in the case of a Treponema pallidum. In the case of a Treponema pallidum. Okay, so each one each of the bacteria has its own factors. Okay, there are also variety of species. Okay, so the pathogens virulence factors, okay, are basically encoded by genes and can be, some of them can be easily identified also. Okay, if the genes of these virulence factors or adhesions are basically inactivated, okay, the virulence in the pathogen can be also diminished. Okay, virulence can be also diminished. Okay, and virulence factors for the adhesions, okay, there are, as I discussed, there are a variety of factors. Okay, so for example, in the case of a pathogen, Streptococcus pyogenes, Streptococcus pyogenes, which causes strep throat disease, and it contains protein F. Okay, there are many examples of these. Okay, I'm just going to discuss a few of them, which contains protein F. Okay, it basically attaches only to the respiratory epithelial cells, okay, of the human beings. Okay, this protein F only attaches to the respiratory epithelial cells. The next one, as we discussed, Streptococcus mutans. Okay, it contains another adjacent, which is also known as adjacent P1, and its attachment site is the teeth. Okay, now the next one, Vibrio cholerae. Okay, you all know it causes cholera. It has an adjacent N-methyl phenylalanine pili. Okay, I am repeating it, N-methyl phenylalanine pili. Okay, it's an pili, and its attachment site is the intestinal. It is the intestinal epithelial cells. Okay, it is the intestinal epithelial cells. So adherence basically also helps in the colonization of the pathogen also. Different types of portals and different types of factors are basically used for the adjacent factors. Okay, so how basically genes or basically are involved in the adhesions. Okay, and what is this basic mechanisms and genes? I'm not going to go in that portion very more in a detail. Okay, just give you some of the idea. There is a term known as pathogenicity islands. Okay, there is a term called pathogenicity islands. And what are pathogenicity islands? And these are basically large fragments, okay, of the bacterial chromosomal plasmid DNA or the plasmid DNA, which can encode virulence factor of a pathogen, which can encode virulence factor of the pathogen, and the size of these fragments is around 10 to 200 kilo bases. Okay, their size is around 10 to 200 kilo bases. Okay, and these fragments, DNA fragments, are called pathogenicity islands, and these fragments are called pathogenicity islands. Okay, so the many bacteria such as Yersinia species, Pseudomonas, Shigella, Salmonella, or it may be even the enteropathogenic Escherichia coli, basically carries at least one pathogenicity island. Okay, so some of the fragments of the DNA, okay, which are going to encode for the virulence factor, and the pathogenicity islands generally increase the bacterial virulence and are normally absent in the case of a non-pathogenic bacteria. Okay, are basically absent in the case of non-pathogenic bacteria. Okay, so detection can be done at a molecular level if you know the product and the genes which are involved in the virulence. Okay, for example, in the case of a E. coli, the pathogenicity island is basically KEGG PI. Okay, is basically KEGG, sorry, not P1, it's KEGG P1, CAG P1. Okay, and the product of the gene, okay, or the gene product is basically type 4 secretion proteins, type 4 secretion proteins. Okay, and what is the function of these proteins? They are basically cytotoxins. They are basically cytotoxins. Okay, so another one example, let me discuss again Vibrio cholerae, okay, which has a pathogenicity island VP, okay, and the gene product is a secreted protein, okay, it's a secreted protein, and basically its function is like a toxin, is like a toxin. Now another one of the more one of the interesting one in the case of Yersinia pestis, okay, it has a pathogenicity island HPI1, and its gene product is basically siderophore synthesis, and its gene product is basically siderophore synthesis, and the function is basically ion uptake and the storage, ion uptake and the storage from the human beings. Okay, similarly to the pathogenicity islands, okay, there are also invasion factors. Okay, there are also invasion factors which are basically found in this one. Okay, so pathogens can be described in terms of their infectivity as well as invasiveness, and the infectivity is basically the ability of the organism to establish a discrete focal point of a infection, and the attachment to the specific cell surface proteins, which basically permits uh, microbial mediated infection also, but in some cases can also induce cell mediated microbe internalization also, and many of the pathogens basically have different types of mechanisms of the internalization. Okay, now the term invasiveness is basically the ability of the organism to spread to the adjacent or the other tissues, and for some pathogens a localized infection is sufficient to cause a disease. Okay, for some pathogens a localized infection is sufficient to cause disease. However, many pathogens invade other tissues also. Okay, so simply uh, pathogens may either actively or passively penetrate host membranes also. Okay, so the diagram given here, okay, is basically it's often fimbriae. Okay, it's often fimbriae, where you can see the where fimbriae X SN adjacent, fimbriae X SN adjacent. Okay, and as I told you, there are variety of uh, adhesive mechanisms through which it can move forward. Okay, so in this case, the in the diagram given here, fimbriae, which basically attaches to the host cell, with the help of their fimbriae, fimbriae. Okay, now moving to the next diagram. Now the capsules, the second example is of a capsules, where adherent extracellular capsules made up made of slime or other sticky substances. You all already know the properties of the capsule. Okay, you all already know the properties of the capsule. Okay, where these capsules basically can bind, okay, where these capsules can bind to the bacterial, can bind to the host cell with the help of their capsules. Okay, now moving forward with the next diagram, which includes spikes, now in the case of a virus, now in the case of a uh, virus, okay, viral envelope spikes, okay, let us assume this is a virus and it has a particular spikes structure which basically help the virus, to attach to the host cell, okay, to attach to the host cell. This is how virus attaches to the host cell, and there are various other examples also, okay, of the various adhesions produced by various bacteria. Okay, for example, Neisseria gonorrhoeae, you all know it causes a disease gonorrhea. Basically, its fimbriae attaches to the genital epithelial cells. Okay, Escherichia coli, next one, which basically causes diarrhea. Okay, so another as a whole, the surface molecules on the pathogen called adhesins or ligands bind specifically to the complex surface receptors on cells on certain host tissues, and these are the receptors. And some of the examples of the receptors are basically glycoproteins. Okay, now here the attachment of E. coli, where you can see the yellow green cells, okay, to the human urinary bladder, okay, on the human urinary bladder cells. Now in this case, bacteria, the purple ones, adhering to the human skin, which are adhered to the with the human skin. Okay, now some of the examples which I am going to discuss. Okay, but the first one is Neisseria gonorrhoeae, which causes disease gonorrhea, and the adjacent mechanism is that the fimbriae basically attaches to the genital epithelial cells. Next example is of Escherichia coli, and they cause disease diarrhea, and their mechanism is basically fimbrial adjacent. Next comes the Shigella. Which causes disease dysentery, and basically fimbriae attached to the intestinal epithelium. Next comes the Mycoplasma. It causes pneumonia. Okay, its adjacent mechanism is their specialized tip at the ends of the bacteria fuses tightly to the lung epithelium. Now the next example, it is involved in the burns and the lung infections. Adjacent mechanism is by use of fimbriae and the slime layer produced by the bacteria. Okay, so the next examples. Next one is a Streptococcus pyogenes, and this is involved is a pharyngitis and impetigo. Okay, and the adhesion mechanism is basically lipoteichoic acid and a capsule anchored to the cocci to the epithelium. So in this case, lipoteichoic acid and capsule basically help as a adhesion factors. Next comes Streptococcus mutans and Streptococcus sobrinus. Disease in which they are involved is dental caries, and they produce a dextran slime layer which glues cocci to the teeth, okay, and surface after the initial attachment. So after the attachment with the teeth, okay, they are going to produce a slime layer which is of a dextran, and this dextran helps the Streptococcus to adhere with the tooth surface. Next comes the influenza virus. Okay, it causes disease influenza, and it attaches to the cell surface using viral spikes. Next comes the poliovirus. and disease it causes is a polio. It causes is a polio, and the capsid proteins attach to the receptors on the susceptible cells. So, in the case of influenza, viral spikes are used. Now, in the case of polio, capsid proteins basically are used as an adjacent factors. Okay. Now, another virus, it's an HIV, human immunodeficiency virus. It causes AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. Okay. Again, in this case, viral spikes basically adhere to the white blood cell receptors. Okay, so HIV basically attaches with the white blood cells with the help of the spikes which are present in the HIV. Okay, this is their mechanism for the adhesion to the host cell. Now you can see clearly that each of the every pathogen has its own different mechanism. Okay, and they are also are specific to a only specific set of cells. For example, the HIV basically attaches to the white blood cells. Okay. Now next comes a protozoa. Okay, a protozoa Giardia lambelia, and it causes giardiasis. It causes giardiasis. Okay, and its mechanism is different from the all of the above. Okay, it's an protozoa and it's an eukaryote, and basically a small suction disc on the underside attaches to the intestinal surface. So it's a some type of suction disc which can help to adhere to the intestinal surface of the human beings. This is how the Giardia lambelia can cause a disease. Okay. Now moving with our next topic, which is basically the penetration of the epithelial cell layers, which is basically the penetration of the epithelial cell layers. Although the penetration of epithelial cell layers follows the adhesions in most infections, and this is always not a prerequisite to any of the infections. It is not always the same. So the microorganisms can merely multiply on the epithelial surface and cause damage without the penetration of the body also. Okay, so, one of the most example is of a Vibrio cholerae, which is basically a causative agent of several diarrheal diseases known as cholera. Severe diarrheal disease known as cholera, which basically multiplies on the epithelial cell layers itself of the small intestine, where it produces a toxin that causes the loss of fluid from the epithelial cells and kills the cells. Okay, this is how the penetration of epithelial cells work. So the example of Vibrio cholerae, okay, does not need to enter the cell. Okay, it can still establish the infection and without entering the cell, and this it does with the help of toxin. It does it with the help of toxins which are produced. Okay, toxins which are produced by the cells. Okay, so there are also various other examples moving forward. So basically it involves passive penetration into the body and also involves active penetration into the body. And what do you mean by active, and what do you mean by passive penetration? Passive and active penetration. Now let's have a look at the passive penetration of the body. So how basically this uh, passive penetration is basically involved. Okay, so it should be emphasized that the penetration of the body surfaces may be achieved not only actively but also passively and this penetration, okay, this penetration in which directly pathogen is not involved but passively but passively, the mechanisms involved in the case of passive penetration uh, have nothing to do with the properties of the microorganism. And any mechanical echoes breach in the body surfaces can can introduce pathogen directly into the underlying tissues, okay, such as in the case of a wounds or a burns, okay, in which none of the pathogens directly enter the cell actively, but the other factors, you may have a hurt, you may have a burn, or you may even have a wounds, okay, or your cell may be ruptured by mechanical means, by accident, whatever the cases it may be, okay. So for example, in the early years, okay, soldiers wounded on the battlefield may develop gas gangrene if the wound becomes contaminated with the Clostridium perfringens. Okay, so this is one of the example where Clostridium perfringens basically does not enter directly. Okay, does not enter directly into the cell, but only enters when a when the person is hurt or wounded. Okay, but this bacteria can cause a disease and develop a gas gangrene also. And as you all know, Clostridium perfringens is basically present in soil and fecal matters also. Okay, so similar is in the case of burns. When you get burns, okay, you often become infected with the Pseudomonas aeruginosa or other aerobic or facultative anaerobic bacteria surrounding your environment. Okay, so there are various it basically depends on the environment around you. And another possible mode is the penetration by arthropods, okay, by the arthropods. For example, Borrelia species cause relapsing fever in the human beings, okay, and when the spirochetes are introduced by a bite of a tick or a body louse, okay. So this is how the passive penetration basically works. Now next comes the active penetration into the body, where some pathogenic microorganisms are capable of penetrating the epithelial layer to which they are attached. For example, in the case of a bacillary dysentery, Shigella can penetrate into and kill the epithelial cells of the colon and then spread to the adjacent cells, which are in turn killed, okay. So the result is the formation of lesions known as ulcers, that is the areas of the intestinal wall which have a disintegrating or the necrotic dead tissue. And another example of active penetration is basically influenza virus penetrates the epithelial cells lining nasopharynx, trachea and bronchi, and the virus undergoes replication and the new viral progeny are subsequently liberated from the infected cells. The severity of the influenza basically depends mainly on the degree of the host cell destruction during the viral multiplication. So, in the case of the active penetration, where a pathogen is basically going to actively participate in the penetration of the other tissues, cells or organs. Okay, it is going to actively participate, where its virulent factors are going to be used for the penetration, okay. And after the penetration through or between the epithelial cells, some pathogens may penetrate into the depot tissues of the body and may even become widely disseminated throughout the body also. So particularly if the organism obtains access to the lymphatic system or the blood vascular system. So what happens if the organism enters lymphatic system or blood vascular system? Okay, so now comes the ability of the invasiveness. Okay, now comes the ability of the invasiveness. Okay, as I told you, invasiveness signifies the ability of a pathogen to spread in the host tissues after establishing the infection. After establishing the infection, and the highly invasive pathogen characteristically produce spreading or generalized lesions, while the less invasive pathogen cause more localized lesions. Okay, so it depends on the type of pathogen which is involved in the infection. Okay, so the streptococcal septicemia, okay, which basically follows a viral infection through which it can spread through the blood. Okay, so here comes what happens after the penetration. What are the events after the penetration? Okay, it involves growth in the tissues, next the infection of the lymphatic system and infection of the blood through which the pathogen spreads throughout the body. So now the first one is the growth in the underlying tissues. In some infections, the microorganism may simply grow in the tissue which finds itself causing a localized infection. Okay, and one of the most common example is of a Staphylococcus aureus, where a characteristic lesion is an abscess. And it's an world of cavity. It's an world of cavity in the tissues containing staphylococci and numerous white blood cells, and that may collectively form a pasty mass called a pus, and they are dead and disintegrating tissue cells that have been killed by the toxins elaborated from the staphylococci. Okay, so the invasion mechanisms in the case of a penetration, okay, basically have various other factors also. Okay, for example, uh, in other infections, the organism may not remain localized. It may spread through the tissues also. One of the example is of a Clostridium perfringens, which causes wound infection, gas gangrene. In this case, initiation of the gas gangrene depends on the occurrence of the anaerobic conditions in the wound, and as it occurs in the crushed tissue or the clotted blood. Okay, or the clotted blood. Okay, so the Clostridium perfringens begins to grow, and the bacteria elaborate toxins. Okay, bacteria elaborate toxins that kill some of the surrounding healthy tissue also, and this tissue becomes anaerobic and can support the growth of Clostridia, which in turn elaborate more toxins that kill more amount of tissues and allow the organisms to spread further into the body. Okay, this is basic mechanism of the Clostridium perfringens. And another factor which contributes to its infection is the rapidity of the tissue invasion in production of large amount of hydrogen gas by the bacteria, and the pressure of this gas separates the connective tissue sheets from the muscle tissue, forming a space that can rapidly be filled by the Clostridia containing fluid, and by this means Clostridia can quickly invade the entire length of the muscle, and the amputation of a limb is often the only way to stop the spread of the Clostridium perfringens to the rest of the body. So one of the example I have given here, okay, in which the invasion of the intestinal cells by Salmonella, okay, which basically triggers an inflammatory response leading to the release of the antimicrobial peptides, okay, or the production of the ROS. ROS basically reactive oxygen species by the neutrophils, and in this case hydrogen sulfide, a fermentation end product generated by the commensal bacteria, is oxidized into thiosulfate by the colonic epithelium and then into tetrathionate by the reactive oxygen species. So in contrast to the fermenting bacteria of the microbiota, Salmonella can use this tetrathionate as a terminal electron acceptor to support the growth in the case of anaerobic conditions. And the use of the tetrathionate in addition to Salmonella resistance to antimicrobial molecules also and allows this pathogen to outcompete the bacteria which are already present in the system. So here H2S will be converted in thiosulfate and thiosulfate will be converted into tetrathionate. Okay, but it will be converted with the help of ROS, which is basically a reactive oxygen species which is produced by a neutrophil, and but this tetrathionate can be again converted into thiosulfate with the help of a Salmonella, which Salmonella uses as an electron acceptor under the anaerobic conditions. Okay, now you can see the inflation which is being produced in the cell. Okay, inflation which is being produced in this cell, and similar is the mechanism of Salmonella typhimurium. Basically, a ruffling occurs, a ruffling of host cells plasma membrane occurs through which it infects the other cells of the human body. Now comes the infection of a lymphatic system. Okay, the diagram given here represents a lymphatic system where many pathogenic microbes can spread from the initial site of the infection to the lymphatic system, and the body tissues are permeated by a network of blood capillaries which supply oxygen and nutrients to the tissue cells, and this capillary have very thin walls, and some of the fluid portion of the blood leaks out into the tissues in some cases, and such fluid would cause tissues to become swollen unless it is returned to the blood vascular system. So the microorganisms present in the tissues may be also collected by lymphatic vessels and can infect them. For instance, in the Ehrlichia, an inflammatory disease caused of a skin caused by Streptococcus pyogenes, the painful lesions spread by the invasion of the lymphatic system or the subepidermal tissues. Now here look at the lymphatic vessel, here a heart, okay, and the streams move from the vein, thoracic duct, lymph nodes, and finally the tissue, where a bacterial infection basically can enter the lymphatic vessels, okay, and spread through the other organs of the body. Okay, it may be heart, lungs, etc. So the microorganisms infecting a tissue may gain access to the thin-walled or finely branched lymphatic vessels which collect excess tissue fluid. Okay, so if the defenses of the lymph node are overwhelmed, the microorganisms may multiply and then pass to the thoracic duct. Okay, may pass to the thoracic duct, and which empties lymph into the venomous blood circulation via the subclavian vein. And this is how the organisms reach heart and are eventually distributed throughout the body through the blood. Now comes the infection of the blood, where the initial site of the entry of the blood may be passive or by even active means. Passive by means of any injury, mechanical injury, or whichever injury it may be. Okay, and the pathogenic organisms may be able to enter blood capillary or venule and thereby gain direct access to the blood vascular system, causing a bacteremia. And once in the bloodstream, the organisms can be carried to different parts of the body and can cause localized infections. For example, Neisseria meningitis present in the nasopharynx can reach the meninges. Okay, what are meninges? These are the membranes that cover brain and the spinal cord by means of a transient bacteremia. By means of a transient bacteremia, and can thereby cause severe meningitis. Okay, so by means of the bacteremia, similarly, the spirochetes of the genus Leptospira can reach kidneys, kidneys where they may eventually cause a renal failure. Okay, okay. So in the case of a um infection in the bloodstream, okay, in some of there are also various other instances where a pathogenic microorganism may gain access to the bloodstream directly by infecting the lymphatic system, okay, by the lymphatic system, and sometimes these organisms are not easily destroyed by the macrophages of the lymph node, and they can multiply and eventually begin to enter the blood circulation, causing the bacteremia, and the bacteria eventually localize in the different parts of the body, and particularly in the macrophages of the liver and spleen. Okay, in the macrophages of the liver and spleen, and they also reinfect various lymph nodes, since they are nourished by the blood. And in some of the other infections where bacteria may also multiply in the bloodstream and produce toxic products, a condition known as septicemia. And this septicemic infection range from chronic to the acute ones, and one of the most severe is of an example of an anthrax. It's a disease, you all know, of animals and sometimes humans, in which Bacillus anthracis organisms may often exceed the number of erythrocytes in the blood. Okay, even there are more than the erythrocytes which are present in the blood. So the septicemic infections often begin as a localized infections that later become generalized. For example, streptococcal pharyngitis. A staphylococcal abscess and a bubonic plague may all subsequently give rise to a septicemia. Okay. So here comes the end of the events in infection following a penetration. Tomorrow I am going to cover the microbial virulence factors. Okay, where a more type of an informative present is there regarding the various virulence factors and its function. You need to remember virulence factors and its function in more detail. Okay, we will discuss it tomorrow, and please join our session of the WebEx. Okay, please join the session of WebEx. Don't worry about Genesis. Okay, I will tell him to start the lecture after 10 minutes. Okay, please join the lecture of the WebEx, and please comment present, sir, for the attendance.